This week, Mercury enters shadow as we get ready for the next Mercury retrograde of 2025. As well, we will be having Venus conjoining Uranus at 29 degrees Taurus, which is in a really exciting transit, and it's just kind of some spontaneous pleasure and fun right before Venus enters Gemini, which is also incredibly exciting. And this week, we also have Neptune stationing retrograde, which I have a lot to say about that. I think it's going to be really interesting in terms of looking at what our delusions kind of were. Like, there's the fantasy of what we want, there's the vision of what we want. And when Neptune goes retrograde, we start realizing, okay, what was real and what was not real. And by the end of this week, we're going to be having Venus make a sextile to Saturn and Venus make a sextile to Neptune. So not the biggest week in the astrology, but it is exciting and fun. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for June 30th through July 6th of 2025. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, my job is to tell you what is going on in the astrology and help guide you with the astrology to use it to your advantage so we are not victims of the astrology and we are actually doing something with it. This is an exciting week. Like I said, Mercury enters shadow. I'm looking forward to this Mercury retrograde, to be honest with you. I'm going to have a Mercury retrograde video out soon about it, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. The Venus-Uranus conjunction is great. Neptune stationing retrograde it's coming. That's pretty much the way I would put it. So let's just go ahead and jump in. So technically, Mercury entered shadow really late Sunday night, but because it's the beginning of the week, it's a Monday morning, Mercury entering shadow, I think, is a little bit more appropriate to put for Monday morning. As well, we will be having the moon in Virgo making a conjunction with the South Node. So, okay, as Mercury enters shadow, what you're going to start seeing here is what will be reversed and delayed. This Mercury retrograde is about delays, slowdowns. This Mercury retrograde isn't bad. It's not making any negative aspects. Mars, which is in Virgo, so Mars is beholden to whatever Mercury's doing, is going to be conjoining the South Node during this time too. So a lot of this Mercury retrograde just seems to me like a lot of releasing and letting go. And as Mercury enters shadow, the thing that you want to do is from that point, so starting Monday, whatever you're talking about or discussing, there's going to be things that get reversed. There's going to be things that get slowed down. And the thing is, oftentimes in astrology, we try to get ahead of the astrology, right? Like, oh, Mercury's going to be retrograde, so I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to do that. It just doesn't work that well. Like, sometimes you have to just let things take their time and be delayed, and you can't have any control over it. And so as Mercury enters shadow on Monday, you're just going to start seeing what's going to be delayed or reversed. The other thing I wrote down was you have to start looking at what you're saying. So as Mercury does go retrograde, here at the shadow point, there's going to be things that you discuss, things that you say, things that are communicated to you that you will probably come back to at some point, whether that's, just any sort of dialogue, any sort of communication. Just there's something about Monday where you're going to hear something that will come back up. And I think that's also added on to the moon conjoining the South Node. The South Node is, I don't use the word karmic in my astrology for a lot of reasons. I don't think it's necessary all the time, nor really helpful. And I think the word karmic is thrown around. It's like Pluto's karmic, Saturn's karmic, the nodes are karmic, the moon's karmic, everything's karmic. And I don't necessarily know if I subscribe to that idea much more. But again, I'm a human being and my ideas change all the time. So maybe I'll come back to that. But what I thought about with the moon conjoining the South Node is things from the past come up a lot with the moon conjoining the South Node, or just the South Node in general. There is a level, though, of not being as ambitious about something, almost being lazy, because the moon is the South Node is very draining and exhausting. And I think as the moon's in Virgo, where we want to be really organized and critical and have our shit together, the moon conjoining the South Node on Monday has this, you don't need to get everything done on your list, and you're not going to be able to get everything done on your list. This is kind of like, hey, you might have this list of things, but if that plan, doesn't go that way, what is your contingency plan, and what are your other options, and can you live a little bit more in the moment? But with the moon conjoining the South Node, I wonder how much that adds on to Mercury being in shadow, as in, oh, this conversation or what's going on Monday just kind of comes back up again as we get to later July and the beginning of August. Then once we get to Tuesday, the moon, while it's in Virgo, is first going to make a trine to Venus. Then it's going to make a trine to Uranus. Then the moon is going to enter Libra. Then it will go opposite Saturn, opposite Neptune immediately. And then it will start to trine Pluto. And what I was thinking about with the moon in Virgo, after it conjoins the South Node and it trines Venus, is like having a smaller list is more valuable. The hard part about Virgo is an incredibly important sign, and I think it's a really good sign. But oftentimes what you can do is, when you like organizing your information, right? Like, for example, we've all been in those points of, let me buy a new planner, let me buy a new notebook, let me download this new app. And you do all this organization and it's like fake in terms of you getting anything done. Like you don't really move the needle anymore, but you feel as if you got more done. That's what that reminds me of. And I think as the moon separates from the south node and starts to trine Venus, it's like less is a little bit more here. What are the specific things that we can kind of take care of and do? The moon trining Venus is always going to be good. It's very earthy. It's very grounded. It's very nice. And as the moon makes then that trine to Uranus, there's a little bit of this last minute, oh, you know what? Let me fix this. Oh, let me try this out real quick. And, something just kind of spontaneously ends up working out. Now, as the moon ingresses into Libra, then goes opposite Saturn and Neptune, the thing I wrote down was like, you can't keep the peace or the balance. Like, this is something that you're going to see really loudly in August. The beginning of August is both the best and the worst astrology of this year. And the reason being is Mars will go into Libra and it's going to go opposite Saturn and Neptune. And so as we have these lunar ingresses, as the moon goes opposite Saturn and Neptune, you'll start to see a little bit more of that. And as the moon's in Libra, right, emotionally speaking, internally speaking, we're looking for that balance. We're looking for that sense of peace or order. And that can look like even justice at times. And sometimes, this is something I talked a lot about in my, I forgot what course or what lecture, but it was on my planets lecture, which again, if you want to become a member, you want to learn all about astrology, I have the most affordable and easy way to learn astrology all the way through over on my website. But the moon in Libra, like balance doesn't always look like 50-50. The scales could look like this. The scales could look like that. Like sometimes you have to, again, let's say you're on a tightrope. Sometimes you have to lean the other way, like against the wind so you can achieve that balance. But when the moon is opposing Saturn, oppositions aren't necessarily friendly transits. You can argue that an opposition is worse than a square. And I would argue that oppositions have much more tension. And that moon in Libra is opposing like Saturn and Aries, which is like a lack of boundaries. This is something I've been learning a lot because I have Saturn and Aries and I've had a lot of shit happen over the past few weeks where I'm like, oh, I have Saturn and Aries and I actually struggle with boundaries. That's really interesting. Like I had an event that was like, whoa, like why was that so hard for me to do? And the reason I put you can't keep the peace or the balance is sometimes in life, it's not about, again, oh, I spend equal amount of time doing this, this, and that. And, I've got my whole routine in order. Sometimes you have to throw things out of funk. But on Tuesday, when the moon goes into Libra, we're going to want that balance. We're going to look for it. So the way I would look at it is, hey, rather than going, you know what, I'm going to focus on work all day long and I'm not going to take care of myself or shower or go to the gym or eat healthy. It's like do a 75-25. Try to find where it's like, okay, you know what, I need to put a lot more attention and energy here, but let me at least get enough of this to where I feel somewhat more balanced. I feel somewhat more, have a little bit more equilibrium. The moon going opposite Saturn and Neptune is like facing a lot of resistance, having a lot of barriers to like, it's not even to overcome, but you will be like resisted by something. Like you will not be able to keep the peace. That's kind of one of the things I put down. But then as the moon goes opposite Neptune, you then start going, okay, well, what do I do? Okay, well, I vision things this way. This is what is happening. And I'm not really sure how it's supposed to happen, but I feel like I need to have some balance. And so that's just going to be hard to achieve. Later on Tuesday night, the moon will then make a trine to Pluto. There's something about here of, it's one of those things where I always get caught up talking about, the moon trining Pluto. And the reason being is I don't necessarily think it's that big of a deal all the time. And I don't necessarily think that all of you are going to experience it this way, if that makes sense. But if Pluto is power and a trine is positive and the moon in Libra is relationships, like there's something about like having connections or talking with people and that bringing out some sort of a overcoming of a fear or having a little bit more power or having a little bit more authority and just feeling a little bit more like, have you ever talked to someone about something and maybe you thought you were in the wrong and then you talk to them and they're like, no, you weren't in the wrong, or someone just helps you overcome a fear. Like that's kind of what I'm looking at here. So then we get to Wednesday, and on Wednesday morning, the moon is going to be in Libra. It's first going to make a square to Jupiter, and then it's going to make a sextile to Mars. Then later on, the moon is going to make a square to the sun. And the thing I wrote down with the moon squaring Jupiter is sharing is caring, and there is enough. Jupiter's in the sign of the moon, right? Jupiter is about expansion and hope and faith, and it is actually working. I want you guys to think about this for a second. I need you to clock in and stand on business with me. When Jupiter was in Gemini, like astrology is so powerful in hindsight. I talked so heavily about Jupiter being about faith and belief, and it's in the sign of logic, and we try to like logically and rationally believe things and have faith, and it just doesn't fucking work. It like this past Jupiter and Gemini transit was such a learning experience for me. It's like, and you can't even get out of it. You can't even get out of Jupiter and Gemini. And I want you to think, now that Jupiter's in Cancer, what is your relationship to faith right now? What is your relationship to hope or just trusting? And do you see the difference in how maybe your faith was or your trust was or your belief was last year? And do you see how easier it is now? How much more internal it is and not necessarily trying to just mentally understand everything. I just see it so loud in my life right now. And so as Jupiter's there and the faith is becoming easier, the moon is going to be in Libra, right? And the moon in Libra is focused on relationships, but it's squaring Jupiter in Cancer, where this kind of feels like that moment of like, I have things to give, but I don't want to share, or I feel like there's not enough, or I feel like there's not enough to go around. And I think that's going to be something really interesting to parse through on Wednesday, of wanting to give, but having resistance to it. Maybe it's the person that you don't want to give to that you have an opportunity to. So just really reflect on that, I think, on Wednesday, and look at, like, I would argue there's going to be some tension, but like, you know, give to people. Don't be afraid to share. There's plenty to go around, and that's what I wrote down. And then as the moon makes that sextile to Mercury, I think this is adding on to, again, a level of, you know, clarity, communication. You know, Mercury's in Leo right now, and with the moon being in Libra, this is kind of like being a little bit more, you know, charming and fun and speaking with confidence. Like, something with Mercury and Leo is really good at recognition, meaning like you can spot the greatness in someone and express that really easily and like give compliments almost. And I think the moon in Libra sextiling Mercury and Leo is like really just good for that, of just expressing, you know, something of great virtue or something of positivity towards someone. And then I look at the moon then making that square to the sun. The thing I wrote down was like, evaluations are needed for vulnerability. Oh, my bad. I wrote relationships are needed for vulnerability. And I think as the sun's in Cancer, the sun is this more masculine, more yang part of us that is in a very feminine yin and lunar sign. So there's this little bit more of activating that part of us. And I think as the moon's in Libra squaring that, there might be this little bit of resistance to vulnerability, or resistance to opening up. And the moon being, you know, the sun is in Cancer, so it's ruled by the moon at the moment, and the moon's in Libra making that square to the sun. It's like our emotions are kind of in resistance to that. And so I think it's going to take a little bit of like, hey, you know what? Like, maybe I could be a little bit more vulnerable. And that doesn't mean spilling out the beans and trauma dumping on someone, but just there's a difference between having the energy of being vulnerable and not saying anything versus like, you know, being closed off and walled off and not saying anything. So then we get to Thursday. Nothing happens on Thursday, which again, great. We love a day that nothing happens. If you have plans that you're trying to get shit done and you want to have something happen, Thursday's not the day for it. Thursday is the day for just checking out, letting things happen. You know, you might want to start something, it ain't going to work. You know, you might have plans probably fall through, because the moon is going to be void all day. The moon is literally void. It's not making any aspects. And again, if you don't know what a void moon is, that is when the moon is no longer making any sort of aspects before it leaves the next sign. This is something I'm going to go over in detail in my next course series on the website, which is going to be about aspects, which should be coming out not in July. I think August is when we're going to launch it. Now, the only other thing that I wrote down is, so technically Friday is the big day of this week, but on Thursday, the Venus is really close to Uranus, like really, really close. So you have the moon void in Libra, where it's kind of like, okay, you know, nothing's happening, but Venus is really close to Uranus. There's this anticipatory feeling. There's this excited buildup coming up, like this very, what's the word I want to use? It's an inappropriate word, but it's a like tension rising, right? Energy being built up to something that kind of excitingly explodes. And that brings us to Friday. So Friday's actually July 4th. I've been saying this for about 2 years now. I think July 4th of next year, there's going to be a pretty big attack here in America. And again, I can't emphasize enough how much all of the war stuff is going to happen and how much of it doesn't matter in terms of you giving it your energy and your attention and your fear. For the majority of you, you're going to be fine and nothing's going to happen to you. But that energy of fear sucks away your life, and you need to be more present in your life and what is yours to do, because you give all this attention and energy to politics you have no control of yet. You don't give that sort of energy and attention to your loved ones, your family, your kids, your spouse, your job, anything, yourself, even your body. So I say that because Friday looks also somewhat interesting. 4th of July celebrations. We have the moon going into Scorpio. All right. We don't really like that. Venus conjoins Uranus. Venus then trines, Then Venus enters Gemini. So we have 2 highlights already there. The moon, while it's in Scorpio, will first trine Jupiter, square Mercury, and then sextile Mars. And then Neptune stations retrograde at the end of the evening. So a lot going on Friday. And I think as the moon goes into Scorpio, again, the moon in Scorpio is about like sitting in darker emotions. Like I've thought a lot about this, and I just explained this I'm doing the planets and all the zodiac signs right now on my lecture. And when I was talking about the moon in Scorpio, I think a lot about stagnant water and how stagnant water like just is always bacteria filled and brings up all this disease, and you want flowing water. And so I think that's really interesting in terms of the moon being like fallen in Scorpio. Like when it comes to water, when it comes to emotions, when you get stagnant, when you get stuck, like it literally harbors disease. Now, I don't necessarily think it's the case for this transit, but as the moon goes into Scorpio, that feeling stuck or feeling really deep within our emotions comes up, and that feels a little scary, or we're feeling a little bit more like holding on and gripping onto a darker or maybe more intense emotion than maybe we might want to. And after the moon goes into Scorpio, the thing I wrote down was huge day in bad mood. So we kind of start off with a little bit of a bad mood. But then as Venus conjoins Uranus, like this is not our last one. I almost opened up with this is the last one. It's not. We have another Venus-Uranus conjunction in Taurus next year before they both go into Gemini. And I've been thinking a lot about like, here's what you need to do. You need to look at what house Taurus rules in your chart. What started in about 2018? Uranus dipped into Taurus. I think just only dipped in. I don't think it fully ingressed in May of 2018. I might be wrong. What did you start? What did you experiment with? And I think a lot of Uranus is experimenting and trying new things. And like, yes, it's liberation and all that fun stuff, but there's a little bit of experimentation with Uranus. And now we're getting to that 29-degree point, which people are like, that's the energetic degree. It's really crazy. Yes, I don't think it's that intense. I look at it as the difference between like, this would be like Uranus at like 3 degrees of a zodiac sign versus this is Uranus at 29 degrees of a sign. It's a full bottle, a full cup. And as Venus, which is the ruler of Taurus, is conjoining Uranus, there's this, last build up to something. And what has been the Uranus and Taurus story for you guys? For me, it's been in my 6th house of health, and I didn't know this at the time. I wasn't clocking in on business, I guess, in May of 2018, but I decided to try going vegetarian for 2 weeks. And I totally failed. I worked at this restaurant with an amazing bison burger, and I was like starving because I was just living off Taco Bell because I didn't fucking know how to cook anything because I was poor as fuck. And I was so bad back then. What's it called? I tried to do it and I didn't. And I didn't know it at that time. But since Uranus has been in my 6th house, I have really got into the biohacking thing, and it's in my 6th house of like work, health, and, just trying this and trying that and getting into this and getting into that. And it was a lot of experimentation, and it was a lot of liberation too, because, when I started learning about a lot of this stuff, I started feeling a lot more free and a lot more in control and a lot more, and again, freedom comes with responsibility too. That's like a whole Saturn Uranus thing that I'll eventually go into at some point. But as Venus conjoins Uranus, the things I wrote to him is like liberation, freedom, breakthrough, right? Key Uranus terms, but it's Venus. We're talking about pleasure and fun and desire and, relationships and sex. And so Venus conjoining Uranus is like, what has been this Uranus buildup for you? Over the past 8 years. And as Venus, which is also a Venus cycle, right? And as Venus conjoins Uranus, there's something exciting and fun and like rewarding. There's something, almost intoxicating in a good way. And this seems kind of like a one last, hey, congratulations, you hit this. Congratulations, you did that. Congratulations, you have one more, experimental fun thing that you achieved. And then Venus goes into Gemini, which I'm a Venus in Gemini. Don't hate me, but I fucking love having Venus in Gemini, to be honest with you. But Venus goes into Gemini. The things write down. Okay, stimulation and conversation and socializing. So as Venus, which is about pleasure and fun and connection, she's in the sign of Gemini. So, left and right, communication, ideas. I think a lot about my Venus in Gemini and how much I love casinos. It's one of those things where part of me is also like, I'm a Jupiter in Capricorn, so I'm like an old man at heart. But when you go to a casino and it's like bling, 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 and then there's like restaurants and good food and everyone's having a good time and there's, big TVs and it's just like there's something, and it's like smells like smokes, cigarettes in there. There's just a lot of fun going on and a lot of overwhelming stimulation, which is a big part about Venus and Gemini is just, bing, bong, boom, shit everywhere. However, what I would also say with Venus and Gemini is there's a lot more about opening up and feeling like you could socialize, feeling like you can connect to more people, and not in this like deeper emotional connection, but just lighthearted connection, not being afraid to, a lot of you have social anxiety and can't talk to someone, like even as a gentle conversation. I think as Venus goes into Gemini on the 4th of July, Friday night, I think there's just something about being able to socialize and connect with people. Now, with that being said, the moon's still going to be in Scorpio, but the moon will then trine Jupiter after that, make a square to Mercury and sextile Mars. This is funny to me because it's like you're in a bad mood, but you're having fun anyway. Have you ever done that? I know I got parents in here. It's like your kid might be in a bad mood, but they're having fun and they don't want to admit it. That's kind of what Friday night feels like to me. And as the moon's in Scorpio and it's trining Jupiter in Cancer, the thing I really think about is, I almost don't even know how to express it. Have you ever been in a bad mood and someone kind of like, if whether it was a close friend or for me, it was kind of like my my grandparents, you're in this dark, stuck mood, but someone's just taking care of you, or there's some sort of like, hey, like someone's trying to help you through it or walk you through it or see the bigger picture. And you're kind of stuck there, but you are starting to feel better. And it's not through this, mental sense. It's through this like feeling taken care of, feeling like you matter, feeling, like your heart is warm inside. Like that's what I think. So I think as the moon trines Jupiter, there's this level of like, okay, I'm getting out of my shit right now. But then the moon squares Mercury. It's going to be hard to communicate. Mercury in Leo is very loud. Moon in Scorpio is kind of like, Moon in Scorpio wants like a lot of like privacy and wants a lot of, being underneath things. And Mercury in Leo wants to be like, well, tell me everything. And so there's this resistance to sharing and opening up everything. But then as the moon sextiles Mars, there's this level of being able to like address each individual and specific thing. So that's cool. And then on Friday night, we get Neptune stationing retrograde, which isn't necessarily about Friday night, but more so of the next couple months. Because Neptune's been direct for a while. It will station direct, I think in like November, maybe a little bit later than that. And Neptune being direct is like walking with Neptune. Neptune being retrograde is like Neptune turning around and now facing you. And the thing I wrote down was it real or was it an illusion? And this is the fun part about Neptune, is Neptune is fantasy and illusion and mysticism, but it's also deception and things like propaganda. And as Neptune's in Aries, and we've been in this, state of what is the vision that we have for the actions that we have, idealizing actions, idealizing even things like war, which is really interesting given, the whole Iran thing, because it's so divided at what it seems like. By the way, too, something that has kept me peace is, because again, people are like freaking out about it. 5 minutes ago, everyone was freaking about the tariffs. And then again, like that just like changed. Something that I've come to understand about Trump is it's going to be like this the whole time. It's going to be like, we're going to war, then nothing's going to happen. There's going to be tariffs, and then there's nothing going to happen. Like, just know that whatever happens 5 minutes later, it's probably going to change. And there's a peace in that for me, of just being like, well, we'll see. But I think as Neptune does go retrograde, there's a level of that story and that narrative shifting. And retrogrades are kind of always bad in general. That's something Ptolemy talks about. Now, he didn't know fucking Neptune existed at the time. But as Neptune turns retrograde, there's this level of like understanding where you were deceived, understanding what was an illusion, understanding where maybe your vision wasn't connecting dots. What I mean by that is it's really easy to idealize things, right? It's great. It's super fun. But with Saturn and Neptune, which by the way, as Neptune stations retrograde, now Saturn and Neptune are applying towards one another. That's a really interesting thing to think about. As Neptune turns retrograde, we start to go, okay, that didn't work. I had an ideal, I had a vision, but what about it was having my head in the clouds. And what about it was much more harder than I anticipated, because Saturn's in Aries right now too. That shit's tough. That shit's fucking tough. And I think Neptune might be popping that bubble of romanticism and idealizing things on Friday night. And I think that's going to make people feel insecure, being like, well, it's actually, that wasn't ever possible. And now I suck. So now I'm like sad. And it's not what it is, but it's about refinement. Like Neptune is like rules like alcohol and potions and solutions and things like that. And so something I think about is like refining that process, right? We can idealize what we want to do, right? The having a vision is so fucking important in terms of going somewhere in your life. But as Neptune goes retrograde, we have to realize what part of that vision we didn't have the correct clarity on. We didn't have the appropriate understanding of what that meant. And now we're understanding that, okay, let's take away that illusion for just a second and let's actually just focus on refining that image, refining that vision through applying that action. And Saturn in Aries is like, hey, you're applying this action no matter if you fucking like it or not. So I think leaning more into that Saturn role of things getting a little bit more tough and not being afraid to put it all on your shoulders and get it done is kind of the feeling on Friday night. Then we get to Saturday. The moon, while it's in Scorpio, is going to make a trine to the sun. Heightened sensitivity, really, on Saturday. There's not much else going on there, but it's a lot of heightened sensitivity. The sun's in Cancer, which is sensitive and fun in its own way, but then the moon's in Scorpio trining it, where it's like, maybe this is like a self-care Saturday. So then we get to Sunday. On Sunday, we have Venus making a sextile to Saturn. Venus then making a sextile to Neptune. The moon, while it's at the last degrees of Taurus, will then go last degrees of Scorpio, will go opposite Uranus. The moon then moves into Sagittarius, trines Saturn, trines Neptune, and the moon goes opposite Venus and sextiles Pluto. Big bangs at the end of the week. And here's what I want you to do. This is what I talked about in the monthly game plan. If you're not familiar with that, it's my monthly overview horoscope for members only, but it's a little bit more special than that. When I see Venus in Gemini, and there's a level of fun and pleasure and curiosity, right? Sextiling Saturn and then sextiling Neptune. The things I wrote down was like flirting with the new you. Like we can look at the shit that we're going through and all the responsibility and all the hardship. We can either go, oh, woe is me, or you can have fun with it. And it's the same thing too when it comes to, like, let's say you're flirting with someone and, for most women, you have no idea what it's like to be a guy and to like be able to have to go up to girls, say something witty, say something fun and deal with rejection, be able to overcome it in some sort of way. And I look at Venus and Gemini as being lighthearted about this and flirting with the new you. You can look at like this, oh man, it's a challenge, it's harder. You could say, you know what? Like, how can I have fun in this challenge? How can I have fun and how can I enjoy, and what sort of different mindset can I shift around this? Because you have to have a reframe here, because I think there's something about Neptune going retrograde is like, man, things are getting a little bit hard. And as Venus sextiles Saturn, there's the fun and pleasure is being kind of supported by what our disciplines and responsibilities are and what our burdens are. Venus sextiling Neptune is very like flirting and being fun, and it's kind of like, if you, again, this 90-day new you challenge, which like if you're a part of and you're still going strong on it, cool, you fucking rock. I'm still going at it too, and I'm in the trenches with you guys. But I look at it as, why not use this as an opportunity to like almost put on, not a mask, right? But like, if you want to be the new version of yourself at some point you just have to decide that. And I think as there's this level of confusion and even maybe hardship with you trying to do all these Saturn and Aries things, Neptune and Aries things, there's a level of like, well, you can either make that harder, you can have that, or make it fun. Flirting with the new you, flirting with your new responsibilities, like making them more fun and enjoyable, because this is what you signed up for. This is what you signed up for. And you can either have the burden and that weight crush you, or you can reframe that and be like, okay, this is a fun challenge. How do I work through this? How do I play with this? And just, again, I think about play. Tap into that inner child of yours and have more fun. We take life so fucking seriously. Play a little bit with it. The moon then is in Scorpio, goes opposite Uranus. There's going to be a disruption to our feelings. So again, it's kind of tight, and it's like there's like one last breakthrough. Uranus enters Gemini Monday next week. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So we're almost there. And I'm going to have a Uranus and Gemini video here either before this video comes out or after this video. So make sure you watch that too. But that last moon and Uranus opposition is, I really think, really liberating and kind of powerful. And there's this kind of like gut-wrenching feeling that just gets unearthed. Like the moon in Scorpio opposite Uranus and Taurus reminds me of like striking oil on your property and just everything just spurts out. And then the moon goes into Sagittarius. It's then going to make a trine to Saturn and Neptune. So the moon going into Sag is always this sense of freedom. And here's the thing, what people don't understand about freedom. And I think I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of like what this country was and what it's going into and what all this means. But freedom means like responsibility. Like the more free you are, the more responsibility you have over your own actions, your own life, your own income, your own everything. And we trade off freedom and responsibility, right? Like responsibility is the cost of freedom. And so if you want less responsibility, it's going to cost you some freedom. And I think that's actually super important to understand. And I think as the moon goes into Sag and starts to trine Saturn and Neptune, there's a level of saying, I am free, I am wild, I am enjoying things, and what is mine to do? What is the level of responsibility I have to take on? And taking that on with like pride, like being like, you know what? Fuck it. That's going to be hard, but I'd rather deal with this hard shit and be free than feel trapped. That's what's really exciting. And then the moon goes opposite Venus and makes a sextile to Pluto. And I just want to hit on the moon Venus. This is all late Sunday night. There's an adventurous pleasure happening. So like, yes, oppositions are bad, right? Moon and Sag opposite Venus and Gemini, but it's the moon opposite Venus in Sag and Gemini. Oh no. It reminds me of, have you ever been out with a group of people, let's say, you know, I don't know, bar hopping or something like that. And, you know, one group wants to go here, one group wants to go there, and everyone splits up and then they meet back up. And that's, you know, it's kind of confusing and overwhelming. That's what it feels like to me on Sunday. There's like this adventurous fun, adventurous pleasure and going here and going there. And I don't think it needs to be serious, but I do think there's a level of being able to enjoy it. Now, next week, Uranus goes into Gemini. Big deal. We got to talk about that. It's the last big ingress of the year. Full moon in Capricorn. That's not going to be, well, I think it's going to be good. I think it's just going to be time to really lock it in, suck it up. And Saturn goes retrograde next week, which also, again, makes the hardship and the responsibilities a lot louder. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. Thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, and I'll be seeing you next week.